Today, every CISO is being asked the same thing. What is our GenAI plan? Because the fact is, AI is unlocking amazing possibilities. Teams are using it, enterprises are using it, but it is also introducing a whole new attack surface, and we don't even know how deep that can go. And to discuss this topic, today we have with us once again Steve Winterfeld, Advisory CISO at Akamai, on this brand new episode of CISO Insight. Steve, let's start with this basic question. When you look at GenAI and LLMs, what are the key use cases security leaders like you actually need to protect today?
So as a CISO, I really think about three things. First of all, I think about what are my employees using? So sales or marketing is probably out there using some capability to produce content. My developers may be using it to review code or write code. If I'm in an industry like healthcare, recently when I was in, my doctor said, "Do you mind if I use AI to take notes today?" And so they're just recording our conversation and using that to auto generate notes. All of those bring up different issues. It's on the sales time. You know, do I want all my information out there? Is there anything proprietary? Is there, I don't want to release that we have something coming out next quarter, but if my sales team is in putting that into Gen AI, is someone else going to discover that because it's using it as part of the training model? Are my developers using some kind of code or putting proprietary code out there that other people can train on? And with things like healthcare and HIPAA or any regulated industry, am I compliant? And so first I need policies and procedures for how my employees are out there using it. Next, I need to work with the CIO and say, how are we going to use it internally within our tool set? So within my security operations center, if I have a traditional SIM that's monitoring all the incidents and trying to triage and mitigate threats, a junior analyst, if they could use natural language queries, might be able to say, where do I have, this certain protocol that now has a 0-day? What data is associated with the servers that have that protocol or are using that capability? And so normally that would be a level 2 or 3 doing all that analytics, but now a level 1 doesn't have to write any code, doesn't have to write any queries, doesn't have to configure anything. They can just go do that. So where should we be using it internally? And the final one is, are we going to offer anything as a service? Are we going to put AI out there as a chatbot, as a way for people to interact with our ordering system? And so I want to know where we're offering it as a service. And that's probably where I spend most of my time trying to protect it. Because, now it's open to the world and I have hackers directly attacking it.
And once you decide to use GenAI, the next big question is which model to trust? You've got public ones, private deployment, and now all of these hybrid setups. From a security standpoint, how should companies think about that choice?
The first is that open one that we see the public flooding to. Pick your flavor. There are so many of them out there. And it's a kind of a general service. I can go, write a better email with it. I can do a lot of things with it. And so these public or open AI models are very generic. If I want to train it to, for Akamai, and so Akamai, we provide content delivery, we provide cybersecurity, we provide cloud services. We have a lot of knowledge internally. And if I have a new employee coming in that wants to leverage that, I'd love them to be able to do that with a Gen AI kind of an interface. So you can run a proprietary service and you can ring fence yourself within, certain public ones as proprietary or private. And so then I'm putting all my data from all those services that Akamai does into this. And the model is using my data to provide those same kind of answers you would get from the open one. And then there's that final kind of the hybrid, where you tune an open model for yourself and you add some data in, but you're trying to get the best of both worlds. And this kind of comes down to what is our function, Is it a foundational thing? Are we domain specific? Is it a very specific task? I can go get an AI right now. Let's say you decided to write a science fiction novel. Well, you would go get Pseudo-Write, which is an AI that has an interface specifically designed for fiction authors. And could you do the same thing in Chat GPT? Sure. But you're not going to get the same experience. It's not going to be as easy. It's not going to be as tailored. And so, as you pick it, not only do you want to pick the type of infrastructure, but the type of partner based on what you want. And then the final thing we'll talk about is, as we move forward, do I want to enable agents or agentic AI? So I'll go back to my security operations, my SOC example. Do I need a human in the loop to mitigate some of these attacks? So there's a zero day that comes out. Do I want an agentic agent that's going to go identify what servers it has at anything that has valuable data on it? They're immediately going to segment it and put new controls in there. Or do I want a human in the loop to make sure we have no disruption in operation? So as we think about, what to do from a model or an infrastructure point of view, those are some high level thoughts.
And the fact is that it's not just about tech or security. You have to talk about regulations, compliance, even cultural bias comes into play depending on the region you are operating in. Those organizations who serve global audience, how do CISOs make smart choices when every region seems to have its own AI rules and policies?
As we move forward, that goes back to the function. If you're in a heavily regulated industry, you want to work with a company that has tailored their AI capabilities for that. If you're going in and you say, I don't want you to train on this data, then the model should not be keeping any of it. It should be, you know, recording using, but it should be temporary. And again, depending on what region is, what laws are, then you basically are looking at whether or not you have to be compliant because it's not permanently storing that data. Um, I will say here in the United States right now, Colorado probably has the most aggressive AI law, and it's just going into implementation. So they're the first ones to do it. And they've spent a lot of time on impact. So if the AI is making financial decisions or who gets access to school or something like that, those have big impacts. So there's a higher expectation there. And so we want to make sure they're fair. Well, how do you make sure it's fair? You have to be able to audit it. And if you don't design the AI to provide you the why and how it did something, it can't. And a lot of this is if you go in and say, why did you decide to give that person a loan? And we need to be able to say because of their credit score and their these 5 factors. And if you go in and say, why did you deny that person a loan? And it said, I can't tell you, it's a magic algorithm, then that's a real problem. And so that's kind of the higher level things that, the security is part of that for compliance. But we're also working with our legal teams to make sure we're doing the right thing in the broader sense. If we're working in Europe, they have an AI law. The EU AI Act is out now. There are some in Asia that already have AI acts out. More and more countries are moving into this compliance, and almost all of them are using that scalability factor to try to make sure that where it's impacting people's lives, we can ensure that it's not, hallucinating or picking the wrong example. Um, I could tell you early on in not so much AI, but machine learning, one of the factors we found out was um, it was less likely to hire anybody from an all girls school because historically that's what the model had said. We don't hire as many women, so not as many women went to all girls schools. So if we see that factor, we say no. Well, while they were told not to be biased against women, that sub factor had got into the model. And that's what we need to be able to audit and find out those kind of weird examples of something going wrong.
When it comes to AI, both sides are using it. Defenders are using it to protect themselves. At the same time, attackers are using it to make their attacks more sophisticated. What kind of Gen AI driven threats are you actually seeing out there, and which ones keep you up at night?
I'll focus my answer on that third thing we have to defend, that externally facing uh, service or capability from an AI. And so, one of my favorite resources is OWASP for anything that's on the edge, public facing. The first one was the OWASP top 10 of just web vulnerabilities. APIs became rampant, and they put out a specific model for APIs. They've already put out two versions of a large language model top 10 vulnerabilities. So these are the top 10 things that are allowing people to successfully attack it. So if you go out and look for a large language model OWASP top 10 2025, you'll see the details. I'll just cover highly. The first two things is you want to protect your inputs in your prompt. So there's prompt injection and system prompt leakage. So you want to make sure that your system isn't allowing those to happen. Next, you want to protect your data model, the integrity of it. And so, you want to avoid data poisoning and supply chain vulnerabilities. Um, you want to put behavior controls. You don't want bad outputs. You don't want, the wrong things going out. So you want to put improper output handling, sensitive information disclosure prevention, and misinformation, sometimes called hallucinations. And then the last category is, system and automation resource management. So, this is very expensive to run some of these models. So you have excessive agency, unbound consumption, and vector and embedding weaknesses. And so, if somebody attaches an API to yours and downloads your whole model, they've basically stolen your IP. And so, you want to have visibility to prevent this. And of all of these, this is one of the areas where Akamai has capabilities. We have this AI firewall. The other thing that was on the first large language model list, but not the second one, it was stopping DDoS attacks. So you still need, your API protection and your DDoS protection. And that's another service that Akamai is well known for. But, between DDoS protection and the AI firewall, if you are going to offer a service, most people are finding you need something specific. A typical WAF is not going to just be able to get API or AI specific attacks as the general rule.
Being part of Akamai, you have this unique visibility into what's really happening across the web and the edge. What trends or attack patterns are you seeing as AI systems are becoming new targets?
So, yeah, we're seeing a lot of threats out there. AI bots are on the rise. We have services out there, Fraud GPT or Worm GPT, our criminal AI, Gen AI services out there. And we're seeing a lot of them, if you're from attacking a different country, it's hard to get the social engineering nuances right. Gen AI is making that a lot better. If you want to build a bot army, do you need coding skills? Well, vibe coding is allowing, coding attacks to be written by much lower skilled individuals. Um, Overall, I would say the biggest thing we're seeing is a huge increase of AI bots, and these are attacking continuously. A lot of this is built around scrapers. So, harvesting information, having huge impacts on industries like publishing. And so this is just, we continue to see innovation where people are using the AI to conduct traditional attacks and using the AI, as we talked about earlier, in an agentic way. So the AI is actually running the attacks.
Let's get practical about here. For security and AI leaders who are trying to enable AI safely, what should they actually be doing? Skills, policies, visibility? Where should they start?
First of all, we need to make sure that our employees have the skill set they need and understand the risks they're taking. So, we moved into DevOps. We had to reteach. I'll use cybersecurity as an example again. I had to teach the people in the SOC, okay, you can't put a file integrity manager on a code snippet. You need to work with the developers to integrate security differently. And then the next thing we were talking about is suddenly it's all around APIs. And so I needed to work with my SOC and say, listen, there's business logic attacks. These are a new type of attacks. We need to educate the team on how to deal with those kind of things. Now we're, dealing with Gen AI, and I need people to understand, okay, we're not here to say no. We're here to make sure they understand the risks they're taking. And so as we go in and we try to partner with them so they understand the risk and we mitigate it to an acceptable level, we need those skill sets. So I need my SOC analysts to have prompting skills. I need my compliance people to understand the complexities of Gen AI and have a background in how we would do an audit. I need the forensic people to understand how we would potentially do a forensic examination of, OpenAI. Again, I just said something that I'm not sure is possible, but if it's not possible, at a minimum, we need to understand we're taking that risk. So those are the big things I would say is making sure we have the skills. And then again, that visibility of knowing where it's happening. I don't want people to be afraid of AI. I don't want Luddites on my team. I want people leaning in, getting educated, leveraging it, and optimizing it moving forward.
Since we're talking about culture and we're also talking about some of this culture shift, we have seen DevOps evolve into DevSecOps. Do you think we are headed towards something like AI SecOps, or will AI security just become a part of the same toolbox that CISO already use, or it will become a separate discipline altogether?
I'm going to give a more nuanced answer. I think ultimately we need to make sure, first of all, that we understand this is people, processes, and technology. I really hit on the people earlier on that, making sure they have the skill set. The processes, we need to make sure we have those policies out there, that we've established, what we expect and how we're going to govern. And then the technology, we put in the AI firewall, we put in those kind of things. If we're working with vendor management, we're making sure that we include in the agreement with our external private Gen AI provider that we can audit and do an investigation and pull up the equivalent of logs to see what happened at some point. So across all of this, I think we can't we're going to have some tools that are dependent on Gen AI, but most of our time is going to be spent securing the capabilities that we're providing as a service. I think that's it.
Steve, it's always great talking with you. It's quite obvious that Gen AI is changing the game, not just for attackers and defenders, but also how security teams, how IT leaders need to think about risk and innovation while they allow their teams to play with these new technologies, but also build guardrails so they remain safe. Thanks for sharing your perspective, and I look forward to the next conversation.
Always a blast. Thank you so much.
And for those watching, if you want to keep up with how AI is reshaping cybersecurity, make sure to check out Akamai's blogs, their white papers, and their solutions. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to TFIR. Thanks for watching. See you in the next episode.